We're enjoying 90-degree weather these days and about 50% humidity, so I hope your weather's a little bit nicer where you are. But I've been working for Saltillo for about 5 years now, and I'm just really excited to share this information with you today. Data has always intrigued me. There's a little nerd inside of me that likes that side of things. And I find that most people don't share my sentiment, and I think that it can be so powerful, though, and as we've gotten more and more tools, it makes it a lot more user-friendly. So my hope today is that you also see the value in utilizing data logging with your team. For those of you that may or may not be familiar with GoToTraining, you do have a control panel. And if you're using the web-based client, yours is going to look different than the screenshot you see here. So I do apologize for that. But on that control panel somewhere, you should see an option to control a few things. So you should be able to download your materials. You should be able to raise your hand if you have a question. You should be able to find a chat window where you can type in a question. And you can type that question to the entire audience, or you can adjust it to go just to the organizers. And you are going to be muted by default. And there may be a time at the end that we unmute everybody. So that's where you can control whether or not you're muted, where you see the little microphone there. You can also minimize and reposition your GoToTraining control panel and display windows to customize the experience for you. And on with me today is my colleague, Lisa Tim. She'll be monitoring the chat window, so if you have questions, she'll be helping you with that, whether they're technical or related to the content of the training today. I did mention handouts, so there are 4 handouts that you can download today, and I'll briefly review each of these during the training. But there's a consent form and then 2 guides for the data logging, one for the chat software, which would be if you're using a NovaChat or a Chat Fusion device, and one for the TouchChat application on iOS. And then there's a data log sample, which we'll use today as well. Continuing on with our documentation, we have to just get a few more things figured out, and then we can get on to the content. This is available for 1 hour of 1 CEU. So the time is recorded online, and that acts as your sign-in. So if you're not on the entire time, unfortunately, we're unable to count that for ASHA credit. Within the 1 hour after the training today, you'll receive an email with a certificate of participation and a feedback survey. If you use the ASHA registry, we will need you to download and complete the ASHA bubble form that's available in the materials, and you will email that to Kara with a K at saltillo.com. There are instructions too that you can download that will give you the same information. If you do not use ASHA registry to keep track of your CEUs, we do not need the bubble sheet, but you're welcome to use that and keep that for your records. Since this is offered for ASHA CEUs, I do need to let you know about my disclosures. So financially, I'm employee owner of Saltillo Corporation, and non-financially, I am an ASHA member. So I'm a speech pathologist by trade. I'm a member of the ASHA SIG 12, so Special Interest Group 12 is for AAC. And I also receive Saltillo loaner devices to use in my trainings and presentations. So it's a little bit about me, and to get things started, I want to know a little bit about who is here and your familiarity level with data logging. So my colleague Lisa Tim will do the pleasures of starting 2 polls. And if you could please, actually, I think we'll just start with the 1 poll, who's here. In a minute, we'll do the familiarity with data logging. If you could take just a minute to answer that poll, it should come up on your screen for you. All right, thank you for doing that. So we have a very homogeneous group today of speech pathologists or possibly speech pathology assistants, so welcome. Now that I know who's here, that helps me a little bit gauge my audience. So to get started, the picture is worth 1,000 words. I'm sure you've heard that expression before. And so when we look at a picture and we think about how much information we can get just by looking at that picture versus, for example, on the x-ray, if I would read a description of that breakage, I may not understand it, but when I see that picture, I really understand exactly where it is, how small, how big it is relative to everything else going on. When I look at the picture of the children learning there on the right, you can see the problem solving that's going on in their heads and the cooperation that they're doing. And then over the two little girls on the other side there, you can definitely see her feelings and her emotions that you just really couldn't articulate the same in words. So how cool would it be if we could do the same thing when someone is using a device? If we could really see what was happening, if we could get some pictures instead of having to write this all out in words. So that's what data logging allows us to do. It keeps track of what is happening on the device, and then we have some other tools now, which we'll talk about today, one specifically called Realize Language, which helps to take that data and put it into meaningful pictures. So on the screen here, what you see is a word cloud and then a top 10 word list. And so it allows us to look at this data in more meaningful ways using pictures. To make sure that we're all on the same page, I want to go ahead and define data logging. Data logging captures the language produced on the device. It's a feature that's available on many devices today, or apps today, and it records when buttons are pressed, so a time frame, what words are generated or spoken by the individual, and then how these words are generated. So for example, were they spelled using a keyboard? Was it a pre-programmed phrase or sentence from a single button? Which page was it located on? How did they get to that button? So now I will have my colleague go ahead and do the other poll, which is, what is your familiarity level with data logging? So please take a moment to answer that on the screen, please. Okay, perfect. Thank you again for answering that. It's good to see that we have people who are at different levels. Some of you maybe have never even heard of data logging or used it, and there's a few of you that have maybe dabbled on other devices or systems or tried to on our system. So hopefully today you'll learn something new to help you where you're at with your level. But this is an introductory level training. So for those of you that are just getting started, you are just in the right place. So what we're going to cover in the next hour together, I want you to experience data logging a little bit. Then we'll learn about how to actually set it up on the Saltillo chat software. We're going to talk just about the devices today in terms of how to go through it. We also can do that on the app as well. And your handouts will articulate the process for both of those. But just for the sake of time, I'm going to just do it on the one system today. Then we're going to use Realize Language to see the data, and that's going to be done through a case study that I worked with in the school as a team. And then at the end, we'll have a little bit of a discussion for benefits, barriers, and considerations. And what I invite you to do is to make sure you have somewhere a sticky note or a piece of paper where, as we're going through this, if you have questions, go ahead and jot those down so that at the end, when I say, does anyone have questions, you'll remember those things that you maybe thought of while we were going through the content today. Okay, so hopefully you're in the right mindset, and we're going to go ahead and get started. So the first thing we need to do in order to collect any data, obviously, would be to turn it on. So once you turn it on the system, you're ready to collect data. Now, when we say collecting data, often I think of, pen and paper and little hashtags or maybe a little timer clicker that we're tracking. When we're talking about collecting data on the device, we're really just talking about using the device. So the person who's using the device will just be touching on the device. So I'm going to go ahead and let you watch this little video. This is a 22-month-old using WordPower 60 Basic. The device that's in front of her is the NovaChat 12, so it's a 12-inch device. And you can see in front of the device, or on top of the device, is a book about animals, and her mom is working with her, and they're just reading through the book. So we're going to collect this data, and then in a minute we'll pull the data off, and you'll go ahead and see what that would look like on a data log.
Oh, the cat says meow, but listen, the owl says owl says owl says whoops, the owl says hoot hoot. That's right. Meow. Who says meow? Is the kitty cat? Does the cat say meow? Oh, we went back to the beginning. Should we read more? More. Can we read more? More. Okay, let's read more book. Let's read more book. We're gonna turn the page. Turn the page. More, turn the page. I see a zebra. I see a zebra. And I see an elephant. You turn the page? Turn the page. Good job. Zoe, turn the page, huh? Turn the page. Turn the page. Read. That's right. Let's read the penguin. I will read it. There's a penguin. I see butterfly. Should I turn the page? No. Whoops. Turn the page. Turn the page. Okay. Oh, there's that fishy. All done. Are we all done? No. Oh.
Okay, so hopefully you were able to at least see that. There were some subtitles there for you too. And if you were able to hear it, even better. So that was a 2-minute video of a mom and a child using the device. What I did was take the liberty of transferring that data log already to a Word document so that we'd be able to use it to talk about it. And I've added a few annotations. So this is one of the handouts that you have, and I'm going to go ahead and switch over to the handout version that you guys have here. When you get a data log, you won't see all these blue boxes with annotations. Those are just my notes so that you are, if you're looking at the first data log file ever, you don't feel totally overwhelmed. Okay, so up at the top is a privacy statement. When we talk about data logging, we're really getting personal information, so we need to make sure that we remember that and respect that privacy. In the brackets, if you move down a little bit, in the bolded brackets, that's the date. So in year, month, day format, that's when the log was happening. So this was back in 2016, almost 2 years ago. Then if we continue down, on the left-hand side is the time when the button is pressed. So that's in military time. But we can see that this was at 3:51 in the afternoon. So probably after school, when everybody was home. If we move over, after the time is a row of 3, or a column rather, of 3-letter codes. There are 5 different codes in our software that you might encounter. If you're using data logging on another system, you'll have some different codes. It really is based on the software, the language system that you're using. So we have non-language codes and language codes. And if your brain has already checked out, just stay with me, I promise. We won't do too much more technical stuff this morning. But the non-language codes will tell you where on the page that button was located and then how you activated it. So what was happening on that key or that button. The thing that we really care about are the language codes, and there's 3 of these. So PAG means the message was accessed from a page. So that was, for example, the word read was a green button on that page that they selected. SPE means that the message was generated via spelling. Since this little girl never went to the keyboard to spell and mom never went to the keyboard to spell, we won't see any of those language codes in this sample. The 3rd language code is WPR, and that stands for word prediction. So again, you won't see any of that in this sample because the child or the mother did not use the word prediction on the keyboard, which is as you start spelling something, it populates predicts words that you might want to say next. That's the word prediction on the keyboard. So what we can do, and I'll do this slowly so nobody gets sick, but we can scroll through. What I did was went ahead and bolded all of the language codes. In this case, it'll just be the PAG codes, so that you can see in a 2-minute video, this is the amount of data that we're going to get. These are the words that were pressed and activated on the device. So read, read, book. I'm going to just scroll to the next page. Brother, dog, dog, frog, fish, fish. And it continues. And you guys have this as a word or in your handouts as a PDF. So I'm going to just scroll all the way down, and you can see we're on page 6 and 7. So in that 2 minute, it's giving me a lot of content. So there's 9 pages worth of words. Now, the question is, so what? What do we do with this? So I'm going to switch back over here to my PowerPoint, and we can start asking and answering questions. So here are a few questions, for example, that you might want to know. What day and time was the device used? So we know that it was on October 26th from 3:51 to 3:56. So actually what you guys saw was just a 2-minute clip, so this total was a 5-minute clip. How many words were said, what verbs were used, and how many times did the SMART period, which is the indication at the end of a sentence or to speak the message. So what you can do, obviously, you have to take a little time to count how many words were said, going through those bolded words. Then we'd have to look a little more carefully to see what verbs were they using. We used the word read and pet and see, says, and turn for turn the page. And the SMART period was only used 1 time. But what it allows us to do is have a little bit more information that we can start answering more specific questions. Now, the next option is to take that exact same data file and actually upload it into an online tool called Realize Language. And we're going to talk about Realize Language throughout this training, but the new devices that are shipped out from Saltillo now include a 1-year free subscription to Realize Language. So if you have received the device in the last few months, you actually would receive that in your box, and I'll show you later what a picture is. I think this started effective April 9th. So if your client has gotten a new device since April 9th, you would have access to that free 1-year subscription to Realize Language. What Realize Language allows us to do is look at our data in a more user-friendly way. So for example, this is a word cloud using that same sample. And now I can just really quick look and see, gosh, what are the top words that were used? Clearly, meow, hoot, owl, and fish were used a lot more than any of the other words. I might want to know how many nouns, how many verbs, other parts of speech. So this is another one of the widgets. It's the parts of speech. And I can see how many different nouns, how many, not different, but how many times verbs were used, how many times a noun was used. I might want to know more specifically which verbs were used. So this is another widget that I can go to and just select verbs, and then it's going to put in green the verbs that were used or targeted during that session. And if you notice, the word pet is not on here, and that's because this is running it based off of a word list. So the word pet is not on the word list that is selected currently to analyze against. So there's 2 different ways to do it. You can use the raw data and make some, observations and go through. You can even import it into Excel if you're handy there, or you can upload it to Realize Language and utilize that tool to give you some really cool visuals and widgets to use to help you analyze the data. All right, now that you have a little flavor for what data logging can do, I want to go ahead and review the details more specifically so that you can start collecting data on your student, client, child, spouse's device and seeing what you can learn from it. So this has been a feature since 2015, so it's been available with our software version of 2.1 and higher. If for some reason when you go to the system that you're working with and you don't see it on there, you may need to do an update. So on the chat software, which is on the left of your screen in purple, you go to Menu, Help, and About, and it will tell you the version up at the top. So anything that's less than 2.1 would need to be updated. On the right is in orange is for the TouchChat app. To figure out which version you're on, you go to vocabulary, which is in the top left-hand corner of the screen when you have the vocabulary displayed, and then all the way at the bottom, it will be listed your current version. If you need help with that process, please reach out to tech support either by phone or by email, and they'll be able to walk you through that. Okay, so this is all of the steps that are involved, and I kind of did this with you in like a Reader's Digest version, but let's go into the depth a little bit more. So and if you happen to have a device that's going to be available to you, go ahead and grab that, either a NovaChat or a ChatFusion device, and you can try and follow along with me here in a minute. Okay, so first thing we need to do is privacy considerations. Before you even turn the data logging feature on, the first thing you really need to do is think about the privacy of the individual using the device. This might mean that you need to talk with the client themselves, his or her parents, family members, staff members, about what data logging is, why you would like to turn it on, and when you want to have it on. Setting those parameters up in the discussion is very important. Some facilities, depending on where you work, might want to obtain some written permission. So in your handouts is a consent for language sample collection that you're welcome to use. That came from the AAC Institute. A lot of places that I've worked with have modified or created one of their own, or they may already have one that they use as part of just their overall process anyway to obtain information during the therapeutic process. We do have a couple tools built in to help ensure the confidentiality of the individual. So one is that when you go first time into the data logging settings and you turn it on, it will prompt you and ask you if you would like to set a privacy password. So you do not have to set a privacy password. You can select skip. If you select continue, you will enter a password and confirm the password. It is very important, put a big star by this somewhere. It is very important that you write this password down, because this is related to client confidentiality. We do not offer an override password for data logging. So if you forget it, you will have to completely reset the system in order to wipe that, and it will wipe all of your data. This has happened to one of my teams. It is very sad when it happens. So make sure whatever that password is, if you do set one, is one that you'll easily remember and that it's written down somewhere so that you do not forget it, okay? Once you obtain permission, another thing that we need to do, and it might seem silly, but we need to check the date and time on the device. And if it is not correct, we need to correct it. And this is a real situation that happened to me. Somehow my date on my personal device got out of whack. And when I had done some data for somebody and then I uploaded it, we saw that we were collecting data in 2020. So we're collecting it in the future, which is not going to be very helpful when you're trying to look at maybe when the device is being used. It's going to be really helpful to tell that when I don't even know if I have the correct date and time. So to do that on the chat software, on the NovaChat or ChatFusion, you select the menu, the settings, system, date and time. And I will go ahead and demo this in a minute. If you're on an app, usually you're not going to have this issue because you're usually connected to Wi-Fi, and it's going to go ahead and make sure that you're already on the correct date and time. Once you do that, you're ready to turn data logging on. So it's very handy in both systems, in both the devices and the app, that there's just a section for data logging, and you just check or slide it to enable. When you're looking at my screen, anything in purple is related to chat software, which is our device line, and anything in orange is related to TouchChat, which is the app. Once data logging is turned on, the screenshot down at the bottom shows you that there's a little graph squiggle that's in the speech display bar at the top, right to the left of the X, and that just lets everyone know that data logging is turned on. Another safeguard too for keeping that privacy in mind. In addition to turning the data logging on and off in the settings, which is how we just did it on the previous screen, there are two ways to toggle data logging on and off within the vocabulary. I'm going to show you quick videos on each of these. We are not going to talk about how to actually set that up. So if this is something that you want to learn how to do, that would be a great way to contact tech support or your consultant, or you can send me an email at the end of this and I can give you the instructions on how to do that. First, in the teal on the left is a button that was created within the vocabulary. You can see it in the bottom row just to the right of the home button to turn data logging on and off. So watch as the person touches that button. Watch the top speech display bar right to the left of the X and you will see the little squiggle come on and then go off. Okay, so we can turn data logging on and off from a button. The other thing we can do over here on the right in the purple is to turn data logging on and off from a gesture. A gesture is an action that's done to the screen, and we can assign a specific action to happen when that gesture is done. So here, a 3-finger tap has been given the action of turning data logging on and off. So watch as she taps the screen with 3 fingers, what happens to the data log squiggle icon in the top speech display bar. So it comes on, and then if she hits it again, it will turn off. The advantage to the gesture is that you can do that on any page throughout the vocabulary. The disadvantage is you need to make sure that it's not something that the person using the device will accidentally do. It also does not work if scanning is turned on or some access timing is turned on. So you might think that's pretty cool, but you also might be wondering, why would I need a button or a gesture, some quicker way to toggle data logging on and off? Why wouldn't I just use the setting to turn it on and off? So it's a good question. And what I want you to do is think back to the video that we watched at the beginning. Think about who was using this device. I'm going to turn it on just for a quick minute. So if we watch on there, what we see is both the little girl and the mom touches the device. So data logging doesn't differentiate who says what. It really just gives you a live transcript of what is happening. So the only way I know who says what is by watching the video, looking at my data log, and then highlighting whatever the child says. Okay? Now, there's value in having both of this information on there. Sometimes people say, you know, I want to be able to turn it off anytime that me as a communication partner is going to use the device, and then I'll turn it back on when I'm finished, and I want to just capture what the child is using. For those situations where you want to take the communication partner's data off of the log, that's why you would want a quicker way to toggle the data log on and off. However, I'll encourage the opposite, which is to say there's value in having the communication partner's information on there as well. For example, in this little video clip, what I can do is get some even more information than, for example, what Realized Language can give me, because I can start to look at it and see, goodness, the little girl seems to repeat a word several times in a row. Is that because she needs a timing adjustment or sensitivity adjustment, or is that her learning style? I can also see that she primarily used animal names and animal sounds, and it was the mom who was using the pronouns and the verbs. I can also look at how many times does the mom model a particular word before the child maybe initiates that. So this one was turn the page, which is one button that speaks the little phrase, turn the page. And I could see that mom said that 3 times. And then down at the bottom, the little girl had said mail, which is right next to turn the page. And then she said turn the page on her own. So in this, I can see that mail was a mishit, most likely, and that she self-corrected and said turn the page. So in this situation, she saw that model 3 times, and then she did it independently. So I can see just a little bit more information in terms of not only what the child is saying, but how the interaction with the communication partner is impacting what the child is saying. So big summary from this is that data logging is not a perfect science, and you need to know that going into this. And that's okay. But there is actually a law of large numbers that comes from outside of the field of speech pathology, but it talks about that if we gather a large set of data, the average of what we see should be close to the expected value. So when you think about data logging, if we can have it on and we're collecting a lot of information, we may not know if it's the communication partner or the child, but what we do know is, wow, that device is being used, and this is how often it is, and these are the words that are being used on it. And then we can talk to team members to say, who's primarily using the device? And they might say the communication partner, and we'll say, okay, great, but look at all that really great, modeling that's happening. And modeling is what the mom was doing. So if you're not familiar with that term, aided language input, partner augmented input, it's where the mom is talking and touching on the device to give that language-rich model to the child. Okay, so that's enough talking for just talking and you listening for a minute. Now what we're going to do is see it in, oh no, not quite yet. We're gonna have to do a few more things, then we'll see it in action, I promise. So once we turn the data log on, we use it to collect the data. Think about when you want to collect the data. Is it throughout the day, during a spontaneous interaction, during a structured language activity, during therapy, only at school, only at home? Think about when you want to collect the data. Then you need to pull the data off the device so that we can look at it and think about it. There's two ways to get data off the device. One is through Wi-Fi and one is through a manual connection. So manually, this would be if you have an older device running chat software or you don't have the device opened or unlocked to the Android side, you would do it manually. So what we do is we go into the data log settings and there's an option to save data to file. That saves the data from the device or from the software to the device so that it can then be copied over to a computer. I will show you that today when we do the demonstration. The other way, which is a more simple way, of course, is through Wi-Fi. And this is how you would do it if you had a Realize Language account. So you can only do the Wi-Fi data transfer if you have a Realize Language account already set up. And this is what you can do on the app as well. So today is not going to cover actually how to do that Realize Language setup. But for those of you that have a new device that has the subscription included, there's the instructions in the box on how to get that set up. That subscription does not start until you actually activate it. So if you get the device and you need to wait a month or two before you initiate it, it'll be good from that point for a year. And then you'll be able to learn how to set it up through the Realize Language supports. If you do not have a device that has that included already, you can trial it free for 30 days. And after that, it's only $10 or $9.95 a year for the subscription. So it's a really affordable way to do some data analysis, and it will save you a lot of time, trust me. Like I said, there's a lot of resources on Realize Language to help you. The starter guide is really fantastic. It's very thorough and gives you step-by-step instructions on how to use it. Realize Language also has free live webinars. They have demonstration videos that include our devices specifically, and then they also have a Facebook group where you can ask questions. And I know Lisa's really great at posting a lot of this information in your chat window so that you have access to these resources. Okay, now we're going to watch it from start to finish. I told you I demonstrated at some point. So I'll be switching over to my document camera. If there's any questions or you get worried that you're not able to keep track of all the notes, that's what these two handouts are for. So there's one for chat software and there's one for the TouchChat app. So try not to get too worried if you're not able to follow each of the details as I'm doing it. Know that you have that guide there later. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and switch over here to my document camera. You can see this right now as a Nova Chat 8. I have the word power 60 symbol stick vocabulary up. So if I'm thinking back through those steps, the first thing would obviously be to obtain permission. That doesn't apply today. I'm giving myself permission to do it. The next thing then would be to check the date and time on the device. So I'm going to select the menu icon, which is a little bit different on each device, but it's either at the right-hand side or at the bottom. When I select that menu, I get this pop-up from the bottom. So I'm going to go into the settings. And what I'm doing is checking the date and time on the device. So I need to go down into System and Date and Time. So today is June 7th. My time zone is not Eastern time zone. So if I did not check this, all of my information would be off just 1 hour. So I need to go and find, there we are, Central Time, because I live in the Midwest in St. Louis. And then I need to set the time. So 9:31 is what this says. My computer right now says 9:34. So I'll go ahead and adjust that. Oops, 9:35. Set the time. You can use a 24-hour format if you want, and you can select your date format as well. Now that I'm good to go, I'm ready to go on to my next step. So I hit the back arrow, which is over here on the side, and that gets me out of the settings. I'm always going to start from the beginning so that you know how to do this from the start. My next step is to turn on data logging. So here we go. I select the menu, I go into the settings and I scroll down and I'll see there's a settings called data logging. And all that I need to do to enable it is check that top box. If this was the first time I was doing it, it would prompt me for the privacy password. At any point, you can go in and choose to set that privacy password. So you can choose to skip it at the beginning and then later go back in and add it. For today, I'm not going to set a privacy password. So my data logging is turned on. So that was step 1 officially. Step 2 now is to use the device. So I'm going to go back here. You see I have my data log symbol turned on so that I know that it's being used. And now I can go ahead and use the device.
I don't work. I don't work. You like me. You like me.
Okay, I can clear it out.
Good job. Good job. What do you want to do? What do you want to do?
Okay, so I would use the device. Then I'm ready for step 3, which is get the data off of the device. So we're going to select this menu. We're going to go into settings, scrolling down to data logging. I'm going to do this manually today. So what I want to do is actually save the collected data to a file so that I can get that file off of my device. So I'm going to go right here and say save data to file. Now it does give me the option over here to select a time frame. So if you've had this on for a while and you only want to get the last month of data, you can do that. Otherwise, default is to go ahead and get all of the data. You can also have maybe different people using your device. So if that's the case, you would set up different people on the device. For now, I just want to save to file. So you saw that that little bar went across and it was very quick. I had met with a team that had had data logging on for almost a year, and that little bar took us probably 30 minutes to load all of the data. So something to keep in mind, it can collect a large amount of data, but you might not want to wait that long to do this. So now I've saved the data log to the file. I'm going to go back out. And what I'm ready to do is to get this onto my computer so that I can actually see it, because there's no way for me to visualize it on the device. So what I have here is my USB cable that comes with the device. It's what plugs into the charger as well. And I'm going to go ahead and just plug in my device here. Okay, the device enters transfer mode. Depending on which device you have, you may have to choose allow. I do want to note that this process right here can be done on both a Windows PC or an Apple Mac computer. If you use an Apple computer, all that you'll need to do is download the free software, and Lisa can add this in the chat window, called Android File Transfer. That software allows you to view the files on an Android device. So it's just the ability to read the Android tablet that we're plugging in. Okay, now you're going to have to forgive me for a minute. This gets a little ugly on the screen because we need to do a couple things here so that you can see what I'm doing. Okay, so now I have my device. It's still in transfer mode. What I'm going to do is open my File Explorer on the computer. And if I scroll down onto this PC, I'm going to see that a Galaxy Tab S2 was connected. This is my device. This is the tablet. When I open that tablet, I see all of the files that make it up. Everything related to our chat software is in the Chat PC folder. So I'm going to go ahead and double click to open that. Now, what I'm looking for is my data log file. And it's so handy that this folder called log is going to have my data log in it. So if I had saved multiple files, they would all be in here. I only saved this one. The easiest thing to do is just drag and drop it. Oops, it doesn't want to let me do that today. Drag and drop it to usually the desktop. Since it won't let me do that, let's see, we'll use this on Notebook, sure. Okay, so there we go. We'll do it on Notebook instead. What you can see here, try and minimize it so it's not so messy. This is what you guys saw on that original data log file that I showed you. There's the privacy statement. there's the dates, and then here's the log. So if I'm looking for those language codes, I don't work, you like me. What I would need to do is save this. What I recommend is giving it a naming mechanism that's going to make sense to you. So what I often like to do is the date. So today is June 7th. And then maybe the client initials or the person's initials. So AH Amanda Hentenhausen. And for today, I'm just going to save that to the desktop. Okay, so now if I have a clean desktop right now, so you're not going to be able to see that. Once it's on the desktop, then I can mail that to somebody. That's also how I'm going to be able to upload it to Realize Language later. Let's actually go into Realize Language really quick. So you see that. Here's Realize Language. These are my credentials. I'm going to go ahead and log in. We're going to go to Amanda. This is my dashboard here. Okay, so once I get it uploaded into Realize Language, this is the type of information that you'll see. So you'll have the word cloud, you can have top 10, you can have an alphabetical listing of those words, you can have a word list with frequency, and there's lots of other tools here up at the top, looking at when it was used throughout the day, throughout the month. Okay, so we're not going to go into Realize Language more today. I just wanted to kind of give you a little bit of flavor of that. What we'll do now, let's go back here. Once you transfer that file over, you can unplug your device. It'll get out of transfer mode, and you're good to go.
Welcome to TouchChat.
Okay, I'm going to get back into the presentation here. So this is what we did. The thing that we didn't really spend a lot of time doing is looking at and thinking about the data. This is probably one of the most important pieces, and that's why what we're going to do next is go into a case study where we talk about how a team actually did that. So again, if you have more questions, you should have the step-by-step guide available in your materials to download for both the chat software and the TouchChat application. We also have a lot of great video tutorials online. So if you go to saltillo.com/videos, you can go down to the Realize Language section and you'll have several different videos there to choose from. Okay, let's go ahead and do the case study and considerations portion. I was fortunate enough to have the opportunity to work with an AAC specialist in my territory named Krista. And we decided to use data logging with one of the students and teams that she was working with. So our team consisted of the AAC specialist, Krista, myself, the consultant, the local school speech pathologist, the child's aide, the child's parent, and then of course central to the team was the child himself. Teachers off to the side on this because this particular teacher was not interested or involved in the device very much at all. And that's reality. So that's kind of why I like to talk about that. But what is important is that that teacher knew that we were going to be collecting data, and she also gave consent for that. What did we do? So first we obtained permission. We talked to mom about why we wanted to do this and when it would be turned on. She was okay with it being turned on both at school and at home. We trained the team, assigned roles. I did the training piece. So if you have a local consultant, you can definitely reach out to them for help with this. We set up the device with a data log gesture to turn the data logging on and off. We planned when we were going to collect the data, and then we set up appointments or times to meet periodically to upload the data and discuss it. So the first time that we used it, they wanted to see when the device was being used, and they were so excited to see that it actually is being used every day, Monday through Friday, and the team was super pumped about this. What I did then, and there needs to be someone on the team that plays this role where they start to ask questions. Say, that's really cool that it's used every day, but I notice it's used more on Mondays and Tuesdays, significantly more. Why is this? Or maybe you might say, why is the device consistently not used during this mid-afternoon time from about 11 till 1? Or maybe someone wants to know why the device is not being used at home. it's important that you don't jump to conclusions. So just because the device is not being used at home, according to this one picture, doesn't mean that one, it's not being used because maybe the data log was turned off. Or two, maybe it doesn't need to be used. So that was what happened here. It initiated a phone call home to talk with mom, and she said, you know, he's very vocal at home. We know what he wants. I work evenings, so it's very difficult for dad to have time to focus on it. The one thing, though, that was discussed was his homework. So he does have weekly homework where he's supposed to use the device. And so they did ask, are you doing the homework? Do you need help with that? And there was a really cool thing that came of it, which is basically that dad didn't actually know how to do the homework and so hadn't been doing it. So this allowed opportunity for that conversation. To answer the other questions, it's used more on Mondays and Tuesdays because they said he's better at the beginning of the week and he starts to get fatigued and have more behaviors towards the end of the week. In terms of why it's consistently not used during the middle afternoon time is because when the aide leaves the room, because she has to go cover a few lunches and take her own lunch, she puts the device up. So again, it's not pointing fingers at anybody, but it's good to have a conversation about it. And is it appropriate that the device is going up? Are we providing him with another modality of communication? Do we need to provide training to the staff that's taking her place? All of these questions started coming up. The other thing we looked at was the word cloud. And this was so fun. The aide was so excited. She actually asked for like this word cloud every week. It was sort of like the Fitbit effect, right? Like, show me the data. I want to walk more. I want to say more. So it was very motivational for the aide. It was exciting for mom just to see all these words that her son was saying throughout the day. It also makes the data just much more approachable. And then, of course, someone who's asking questions has to come in and say, you know, I love all these words, but I notice that the word iPad is just screaming to me. It's really, really big. It looks like we're mostly using the device to request the iPad. So how can we start to diversify what he's using the device for? Parts of speech. So this is an example, though, on the left is from a spontaneous language sample over 3 weeks. So like just when he's using it in the classroom, whatever's happening, no necessarily controlled structure. On the right, however, is a structured language sample of a 30-minute therapy session. And what's really cool about having two different ones is that we can start to see what happens in the classroom versus what happens in a very controlled environment, such as therapy. If you had home use, you could even do this for what happens at home. There are some parameters you have to have set up so that you can actually look at these separately. But what it showed the team was that we're maybe not doing the best job of generalizing what we're working on in therapy into the classroom. And so, you know, that's on the speech therapist to how do we train the aide to better support this in the classroom, or how do we change what the lessons are? How do we make changes and support that in the classroom? After we did a collection and we had this conversation, we wanted to have a plan. So what? So the facilitator, for example, discussed the home use with the family, checked in about the homework. The aide decided that she would increase types of words used in the classroom. She was really going to focus on using those verbs whenever she could, since it seemed before she had primarily been focusing on the nouns. And she said she was going to go ahead and leave the device out when she leaves the classroom. You know, she honestly said, I didn't even realize I was doing that. It was just habit. And she didn't think there was anything wrong with it because she was thinking that that was probably the best thing since nobody was trained. And then everyone decided that they were going to continue using modeling or aided language input. And this comment comes from the fact that we were using a gesture to turn data logging on and off. And so in that discussion, what we found out, and we had no way to actually measure this, but it was just through the observational conversations that we had, was that because they were having to use that gesture to turn modeling on and off, or to turn data log on and off, they found that they were modeling less because it was more work that I'd have to press my 3 fingers, say what I want to say, press my 3 fingers again. And this young man is very quick, so we didn't have that extra time to turn the log on and off. So we decided that we weren't going to worry about that, and we were going to just keep the data log on all the time, use aided language input, and then what we will do during that 30-minute therapy structured session is we won't have any modeling so that we can get a clear picture of what he does, you know, more independently during a structured setting. And they wanted to reevaluate in 2 months. So there is a time piece to this, and they didn't think it was necessary to do daily or weekly or even monthly, but they did have his IEPs coming up and wanted to be able to use this information to adjust his goals. So we did it again. So sample 2 months later, what they found was that home use increased. So they started to see in the evenings a little section where it was being used, and they started seeing the homework come back to school completed. The other thing they noticed, there was just overall increase in use. And there was more even distribution across the week. So Mondays and Tuesdays weren't heavy on the orange. They were all sort of evenly distributed. We could see that there was an increase in verbs and adjectives. Over on the right, you have 2 pictures. The bottom one with the green highlighter is where you can actually just get the log, so you can see the individual words that were used in the order that they were used. And so what you can see there is some sentences starting to come in, whereas before we were just seeing a lot of nouns. Now we're seeing things like, I want scissors, I want glue stick. And one of the questions that came up was, well, these are great word combinations, but how do we know if it's the child that is doing these word combinations or if it's the aide? And the answer is we don't know unless we ask the aide, and she might know, right? But either way, it's still really good because either he's the one doing that or he's getting that language model. He's getting the next step, the next level for where he needs to be. If we want to know for sure if he's doing that, then we would probably have to do a more controlled language sample, and that can be done with or without data logging. We maybe would need to take a video too to be able to go back and highlight, oh, these are the things he's saying, these are the things the aide is saying. So that all has to come in to that discussion about what is it that you want to know, and then what's the best way to set that up so that we can get that information. The plan after sample 2. So it was really interesting. First, they adjusted the goals in the IEP just based on the information that they had. But the second thing they did, when he started the school year, and actually he had been using the device for about a year before that, he started on a vocabulary file, word power 48. So 48 buttons on the screen, just a different configuration. And after they were looking at his data, the SLP and the AAC facilitator said, you know, what if we increased him to word power 60, where he would have more verbs on the home screen, more of those green words? Maybe that would help him and the aide to think about using verbs more often because they would be more readily available to him. So they did. They went ahead and switched him, and he did fine with the size of the button. They had kind of done some diagnostic therapy to make sure that would be okay. And then they made a plan to collect data again at the end of the year in May, which was going to be about another 2 months out. So they had 3 samples throughout the course of the year. And what that does is allow you to have a baseline and then an ending. So you have the ability to see some noticeable changes in data over the course of a larger period of time. So what you see here on the left is the November screenshot, one of them from a week. And then on the right is the one from May. So one thing for sure you can see is that home use down there on the bottom. And then you can see that Thursday and Friday did have some more usage. Now, it's important to note that this may not always be the case, right? I may assume and know that there's an increased use in May, but then when I go to look at the particular week, it's really low, and that might surprise me. But that's where you have to think about, oh, was the week that we chose to collect data in May when we were doing, you know, in the state MAP testing, for example? Or was that when he was really sick? Oh, yeah, I forgot about that. Or his device was dead 2 days, right? Maybe the reason it wasn't used at all on Monday was because he was sick home, that the device was dead, that was like a special field trip. So again, it doesn't give you all the information. But you're able to do these sort of baseline to current or present level comparisons. The word cloud example is another one where you can see that iPad is still on the word cloud on the right, but it's not as big. So the team did a really great job at diversifying some of those words that he was using. So they made a plan to just continue using data logging for the next year. They were excited that he demonstrated progress on his new goals. It increased communication among the team. And the big conclusion was that using data logging combined with this data visualization offered by Realize Language, that's what we call where you can look at a picture to get information, data visualization. It was really powerful, and it helped increase team communication. It helped increase device use for him. It increased his language use. It increased their confidence in terms of what they were doing. The aide really talked about, she felt much more confident that she was really making an impact on what his language was and his device use was. And then it provided a framework when thinking about other teams and other students. So the AAC facilitator took this information to other teams. And so the big conclusion for them was, yes, data logging is more than just a pretty chart, and yes, it's worth the time. So speaking of time, it was important for us to discuss the limitations, and these are things for you to think about, and you may already have thought about these, and some of these might be keeping you from getting started. One of the limitations is the time, so the time, to do the training, to set it up, to collect it, to have the conversation. One of the things I find, though, is that time spent now is time gained later, so it's just important to keep that in mind. Privacy, there might be a team that's not willing to provide privacy. Team buy-in, so the teacher in this example was not interested. Realized language is subscription-based, so at some point at the $10, it might become a financial burden to continue to do that. And then the other big limitation is just that it's only part of the picture. So you really need to keep that in mind, that it's not a perfect solution, but it's going to give you more information so you can start asking better questions. So my advice when you're ready to get started is start small. Start with one team, one thing that you want to look at, okay? Know your why. Why do you even want to turn data logging on? What are you hoping to learn from it? And then get support. So whether it's tech support, consultant support, support from your administration, whatever it is, make sure that you have that as well. So if you want to be able to schedule training with your consultant, you can go onto our website to find your representative. You can also go to our support and training tab to watch recorded webinars. This will be recorded, so you can watch this online or share it with teams. Video tutorials, which are going to be smaller clips of information, and sign up for other live online webinars in the future. These are the resources that were utilized today. So a lot of things that I talked about, this is where the information came from. And we only have just a couple minutes, I apologize, for questions. So I'm going to leave up the ASHA documentation information here for just a minute, and then I'll switch it over to my information. And in the meantime, Lisa, I'll let you let me know if there's any questions that we need to address. Let's see. Lisa, do you have a list of questions, or do you want me to go ahead and do the chat window? Okay, I see. Lisa said so far she's answered all of the questions. That's great. I'm going to switch then on my screen really quick so that you guys have my contact information over here. Amanda@saltillo.com is my email address. So if you think of something after today's training, you can do that.
Okay, there's one more question now. That is there a way to log data for more than one student? Will it all be in the graphs in realized language?
Yes, you can log data for more than one student, and in realized language you can have up to 10 individuals on your account. So you would have to just set them up as different people. Let's go back to my realized language. Oops. Here we go. So I can have 10 different people. So when I go into each of these, into their dashboard, I can see their individual. So this is just for Ari, and then I can go back and I can go in and see one for Dave. So you have to set those individuals up on realized language and then tie their data to them. Good question. I see another question on here, so I'll go ahead and just answer it. It's more of a comment, and we have 1 minute, and then we'll send you guys a post test. It'll come up on the screen so you can take, oh no, we don't have a post test anymore, Lisa. Never mind. Sorry. So just a comment, it is difficult to get support from school districts for AC devices when they are not utilized consistently. And I'm sure that other people could agree that that is hard. So I have had some teams that have used this as a tool, maybe during a trial, to show when it's being used or to help motivate. So there's one school district up in Chicago that says they do this for the aides, to motivate the aides, and they try and they post word clouds at the end of the week, and they post calendars to see who can get the most orange filled in on the calendar. So it's not as much about what the student is doing with the device, but let's get that modeling going, because we know that once we can get some strong modeling or aided language input on the devices, we're going to see that increase in the students using the device as well. All right, it is on the hour, so you all are free to go. Thank you so much for spending an hour of your time this morning learning. And if you have any questions, you know how, I'll put my contact information, how to reach us. Lisa, anything to add?
No, I don't think I have anything.
Okay, we can stay on for just a few minutes in case there's any residual questions. Otherwise, enjoy your afternoon.